Okay, let's talk about dollars and cents and buildings and transformation. You've all got issues of that sort. But first, we've got to understand a different perspective. In case you can't read this, a man went to the doctor with a cucumber in his left ear, a carrot in his right ear, and a banana up his nose. "What's wrong with me?" he said. "Simple," said the doctor, "you're not eating properly." We need to begin to understand, things being different. So here's some questions. Is this a church? Well, it's actually the Jose Mateo Ballet Theater. Is that a church? Well, it's Old Cambridge Baptist Church for its worship, but if you look closely, it's the same space. Okay. Is this a church? Not when you go inside and you see this, because it's the Park Street condo in Brookline, Massachusetts, where you've got 20 condos, assessed value between $650,000 and $1.3 million. Okay, is this a church or a worship space? Well, actually it is. It's a workman's circle, 1762 Beacon Street in Brookline, and that's a particular tradition in the Jewish faith, and that is where they gather. Is this a church? Well, interesting sort of thing. When you go into its worship space, here is that at the front. And when you come up close, in Hebrew are the Ten Commandments, and there's a Hebrew thing there at the top. So is that a church? Well, and when you're there at Yom Kippur, that's the front. And there are the people at Yom Kippur, but in fact, it's St. Paul's Chapel, part of Trinity Wall Street, at which the Talmud Synagogue meets. And when you do go inside, you can see the tall buildings there. It was right next to the World Trade Center. And it is, in fact, a museum in some senses now. You can tell there, they don't have the pews anymore. That building was built in 1760. Pews are gone on the sides of the museums because that's where people gathered and were brought in after the World Trade Center was bombed. Okay. Is this a church? Well, actually, on Sundays, it's the worship gatherings for Church on a Hill, but you can see there, Driscoll School, it's in fact a gymnasium of an elementary school, K-8 school. But yeah, it's where they gather. How about this? Somebody was talking about the steeple problems. Sure does look like a church, doesn't it? No, it's not. It's the Hotel Pharmacy and Wild Water Outfitters. It was, in the 1880s, a Methodist church, and it's on the National Register of Historic Places, but no, a congregation does not own it, does not worship in it, and is not used for the purposes which we think of as church. Is this a church? Well, you look carefully, it says Theater Arlington. But when you get closer, it says St. Albans, 10:30 Sunday morning. And when you go inside, you realize it's a theater at which the congregation of St. Albans worships on Sunday morning. Gee, one of the nice things about going to church there, because that's in a shopping center, you got lots of parking. Well, is this a church? People are gathering around. I don't know what they're doing. And if you know about that, you know that's the State House in Massachusetts. But that's Common Cathedral. Worship every Sunday, including before the worship, food for homeless folks. What's this? Is this a church? Well, I know. I go inside and I see this kind of space. And then I see this big kitchen. And then I see, oh my heavens. Actually, if you go around the corner, Jim, there's showers. And here I see a place for people to sleep. Okay, but that's in that building? Is that a church? Well, yeah, it is. And yeah, it's not. It's Church of the Covenant. And what we looked at down there is women's lunch plus place, women's lunch place, but more than just lunch, because of the showering, because of the sleeping, because of the feeding, because of the programs. What about this place? Well, when you go into that building, this is what you see. It is, that building over there is St. Peter's in Central Square in Cambridge, Massachusetts, but that, which we used to call a parish house, is in fact completely rented out to a web operation. Well, that's a picture that certainly was a church, but on that same site, here's the corner, is that building, but look at what's inside it. Those are pews. It's Casa Maria. The Archdiocese of Roman Catholic Archdiocese in Boston in the North End said, sure, worked with a developer, knocked that sucker down, which was costing him, I was going to say an arm and a leg, but probably several arms and several legs to operate. And now they've got senior housing, but they also have a worship space as part of the deal. So here's our different perspective, and I'd like you all to join me in praying this prayer. O God, by whom the meek are guided in judgment, and light rises up in the darkness for the godly, grant us in all our doubts and uncertainties the grace to ask what thou wouldst have us to do, that the spirit of wisdom save us from all false choices, and in thy light we may see light, and in thy straight path may not stumble. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Okay. Now comes the homework time, except you're going to do it here. I know you've got things to write with. So I want you to take a couple of minutes and answer these questions. These are not easy questions, obviously. For any of you who've been in marriage counseling, they're pretty familiar. And I use that as the analogy because in many respects, when there's a gathering of God's people called a congregation, you have made commitments of the sort that we make in marriage. You have made commitments to each other and to God about what we are to do, how we are to get there. And we all know that there is no known for the future. We're planning to go there, but there is no specifics. And so we have to, well, I guess one might say, take a leap of faith. We have to understand our mission, answering God's call to, and for those of you who are familiar with this in the Episcopal tradition, the 5 marks of missions. What are we to tell? What are we to teach? What are we to tend? What are we to transform? What are we to treasure? What we do know about all of these, is that all of the answers must come with a devastating honesty. Going to church, being part of church, being part of God's people, is not getting up, getting dressed up for Sunday morning and looking nice and singing a few hymns before you get to have a good Sunday lunch. There's a lot more to it than that, and you all know that. So let's go back and ask the same sorts of questions. Is this a church? Well, it has a name. That building is associated with the name Holy Apostles in New York City, in Manhattan. And if you were there and took this picture on a Sunday morning, you would see a gathering of God's people worshiping. And yeah, it's Episcopal because you can see all of those in robes in the back, the sort of thing that Episcopals do. But if you come there and take that picture Monday to Friday, what you see is Holy Apostles Soup Kitchen. And if you come there Friday evening, what you see is that same space set up for the Jewish congregation that worships there on Friday nights. So what do we know about Holy Apostles? Well, in the 1980s, it was having a decline in attendance. They were pondering closing. A few folks had said, you know what? Let's do something useful. Let's start a soup kitchen. And so they had a little space over here, and they could feed 70 to 80 a day. And then they had to do some work in the sanctuary, and they had a timely fire, which I have referred to here as the light of Christ. And so what they did at that point was go back to these questions and say, what is God asking us to do? Where is the straight path? Well, it sure helped that the fire had made a big mess in the sanctuary. So that what they were able to do, what they said was, you know, first of all, a bunch of the pews had gotten burned.
Oh, thanks be to God.
And so they said, let's take the pews out and let's go the other way here, and let's do our soup kitchen in that space. It continued during the rehab, and they now feed at that soup kitchen 1,000 people, give or take, every day, Monday to Friday. The other interesting thing in that process, let me go back because you can see it. Over here, and there's a piano, but there's a music program that goes with it. People who have been called to do music maybe have been homeless or whatever, and so it's not just feeding. It's not just going through a line and getting food and on out. It is a gathering. There's people to serve, and it's music. It's going to dinner at a fabulous place in Manhattan. Now there's many uses and users. Holy Apostles now has 65% of its income from rentals, from what other people use the space for. And some of you know that I work a lot in public housing, and we refer to the drug of choice in public housing as OPM, other people's money. The same is true for Holy Apostles. They get OPM for many actions. Recently, for example, they had to update their heating system. They got a foundation grant that covered the entire cost of the heating upgrade. Why? Because probably if you figure 1,000 in there a day, 90% of the people who go through their doors are not members of that church, of that congregation. They are people who were there because they are following God's call of what they should be doing. Okay, this is all saying this is my church. And you heard me, for those who were here earlier, refer to, or at some point I said, things built when this was the Republican Party at prayer. Well, that's our church that way. The people who created it were leading merchants in Boston. If you're familiar with the Jordan Marsh department store, if you know Shreve Crump and Lowe, the fancy jewelry place, those were the people who created this church. And this rectory, when you look at the original plans built in 1914, had its kitchen downstairs, had a dumbwaiter, had back stairs up to the 3rd floor, and the plans read servants' quarters. Now, I know there's some rectors here. Are there any rectors who have servant quarters in their rectory? No. I think we don't do that so much anymore. And so a rector of 20 years retired a couple years ago. And we said, what are we doing with this giant building? And the answer is, we are going to take it from this money-sucking 4-level building, single family, and make 4 units there. And we're making this first and second floor combined into a 3-bedroom, 2.5 bath. We're making in that front bedroom suite a studio unit. And we're making on the lower level, what used to be the kitchen and the horrible steam system, a 2-bedroom, 1-bath unit. And we're making a very large 2-bedroom, 1-bath with a great room on the top level. And by the way, that was the servants' entrance. That's now, this is the entrance to the first and second floor unit, and this is now the entrance that will go, here's the studio apartment here, here's the upper level, and on the back it's on grade, so there's a nice space on the outside. And instead of costing us $10,000 a year just to operate the damn building, heating and electric and all of that, we will be getting somewhere in the neighborhood of $90,000 a year of income, and the rector will live there on top of that. And all of the units, here's the new energy efficient heating plant. One of the reasons you don't see a boiler on the floor is that it's mounted on the wall, which you can do now. And you see all of that piping, all those pumps going up. Well, all of these are separate, and they all have separate meters, so they're all paying their own utilities. Which also means there's nothing quite, in terms of if you want to save energy, there's nothing quite like a bill to prompt energy efficiency. And so all of that will be that way. Gas, electric. The only thing that won't be that way is water and sewer. For those of you who were at the pilgrimage to the boiler room earlier or would like to come this afternoon, you will learn about 1.5 gallon per minute shower heads, 0.5 gallon per minute faucet aerators, and all kinds, and actually this we're putting in 0.8 gallon per flush toilet, so it's only 0.8, it's not even dual flush. All of this to be energy efficient in that house and to make some sense out of a building that was an albatross. Yeah, it cost us some money, but at that kind of stuff, it gets paid back in 10 years.
Just out of curiosity, how many square feet was that?
The total building was about 4,500 square feet. So you're talking about roughly 1,000 square feet per floor. You've got some common areas here, a laundry, storage space. So this unit's going to be about, and that out of there. This is about 900 square feet. This big one up here with all of this is about 1,300 because you get, this is one giant great room. The studio is about 500, and then the 1 and 2 bedroom there and there get you about a 1,600, 1,800 square foot large unit, which the rector's in because the rector and his wife have 2 kids, so they're there. If we rented that one out, we would get probably $4,500 a month in rent. Brookline is ridiculously expensive, but on the other hand, we'll take their money for our purposes. So part of it is figuring out what's there, what can be used, and where you can go with it. Here's another old building in which they had this, you can see here's the church. It's Grace Church in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. There's the sanctuary worship space. Here's the added on parish hall. 3 levels, big parish hall underneath, parish house here, offices, classrooms, all that sort of stuff. Huge amount of space, as you can see from down here, which was kind of getting used a little bit on Sundays and not otherwise. They tried to do a special school and realized that if you're going to do a special school, you have to have folks with either the town has to take it over as a school, or if you're trying to run a private school targeting certain sorts of folks, and there are a couple of those in the Massachusetts diocese now, you've got to have somebody with deep pockets and a board that has deep pockets that's going to pay to make it work. they hadn't figured that out, and their schools died after 2 years. And so what they did was take all of these rooms on the first floor of the parish house and created individual single-use rental offices. They did that. There were enough folks in this congregation that knew how to do building, so they did all of the building, did all the construction. They built the handicap ramp so you've got accessibility into this level. They kept this large open space here as a common area meeting space and kitchen for all of the rental offices in there. And now, instead of just being a drag, it's generating big chunks of money. Among the changes, the multiple benefits, was the sense of purpose that the congregation was able to achieve by facing this question. What is God asking us to do? What are false choices? Having done the school, turned out to be false. What's the straight path? Working together to make something happen. And what were the doubts? Well, can we really work together? One of the interesting problems that we have in our congregations is that we see each other at Sunday morning, but who gets to talk during the service? The priest. Maybe on a particular Sunday, the priest is feeling lazy and asks a parishioner to do the sermon, but otherwise, and whoever is reading but we don't talk to each other much. And you have this little chatter afterwards at the social hour in which everybody's nice, but there's not much substantive goes on. And then maybe a few of you are on the vestry or on committees or do work together. But when do you work together to know what it means to be a congregation? Now, there's two people sitting here who don't have this problem of a building hanging over them, who figured that out. But they figured it out, and among the benefits was this sense of purpose, of making these changes, and also providing the access, because you could come all the way through here and over to the sanctuary, and now the sanctuary is accessible. Okay, it's not right up the front stairs, but it's accessible. And it made some sense for them. Is this a church? No. It's a solar farm. This is at St. Andrews in Framingham, Massachusetts. They started out simply saying, we're getting killed on utility prices. What can we do? Well, in God's grace, or some architect who was smart, or just because of where the street is, their building is oriented east-west so that that very large roof is to the south. And they could put solar panels there. So many solar panels that they're generating enough electricity for all of their purposes and for 2 other churches. And what they're able to save, because they're fixing their prices, if they were paying the utility company in 2013, they were going to have to pay 15.5 cents a kilowatt hour. They're buying the electricity. If anybody wants to know about the complicated way in which you can put these on and cost the church nothing, $0 to put it up there, nothing. They're paying the people who put it up through what's known as a power purchase agreement. That's what PPA stands for. 9 cents a kilowatt hour. They're saving 6.5 cents a kilowatt hour for all the electricity they use, and that generates all the electricity for everything they do in that building. And it's not just Sunday mornings. They have a lot of activity there. And so in the first year they saved $1,300, in the second year $1,800, and it's just going to get better. Pretty soon in that part of Boston, we're going to be paying 20 cents a kilowatt hour. And they're at 9. And yeah, they could do that. That was a case where the orientation of the building was truly a gift of God. And the sun shines down on them, and they are happy. Here are 2 synagogues. This is also in Brookline. I'm just telling stories that I know about pretty much in my own town and not far away. Every place I've showed you so far is within an hour's drive of where I live. So these all happen. This happened to be, Brookline happens to have a growing population and a whole bunch of kids starting young who need to go to school. And there's not enough space in the existing schools. What do houses of worship have, generally speaking? Classrooms. And here are two, in different parts of town, temples that had classrooms, enough classrooms with enough accessibility that they could do a simple update of those classrooms. And they could be used to start for the younger kids, the early education program, the Brookline Early Education, which is then, it'll just keep filling them up. Each of them has 4 classrooms. Those temples are getting rental income of $200,000 a year, which frankly I think is screwing the town of Brookline, but the temples are happy about it. And it makes usefulness of that space during the week. This is the Congregational Church in Stoneham. There was the original building, that's sort of New England congregational white wood with a steeple that's probably going to fall off before too much longer, because that's all the steeples in those old wood buildings do, or they have to get lifted off and dealt with. And at some point in time, what they did was say, you know what? We should add a building and we should have a bunch of classrooms. So there's the plan for it. And while we're at it, we should add a little small chapel, that's right there, and some office spaces. And then there's a big space downstairs. But there's these classrooms. And what they did was say, and this was in the 70s, this town needs preschool program. And we can create it. And so they did, and that's when they built all of this building. And then at some point in time, as life changed, and the original passionate people who wanted to do the school and made it happen got old, and then they became grandparents, and then they went out feet first. It was that long ago. Somewhere in there, the passion for doing this on the part of the congregation faded away. Those who cared had moved on. But the need for it was there. There was a purpose. In fact, it was called the Purpose School. And so somebody in her wisdom, I think it was her because men aren't this smart, said, let's create a nonprofit to operate this with a board that then can reach out and figure out either ways to get grants or literally to make this self-sufficient, to have the tuition be sufficient to cover everybody. And so they did. Now, the problem that they have currently is this is east-west, the way it goes. So these are the rooms right here. Those rooms are facing north. This room is facing south. There's only one thermostat. Okay. Jim, tell me what's the problem?
Mixed-use buildings, spaces, and no control over heat.
Right. So in the middle of winter and the sun's coming in, this room's warm enough and this is cold because the sun's coming in here and not over here. They both have got eastern stuff. Okay, maybe they get a little sun in the morning, but they don't. And if the thermostat's over here, it doesn't help anybody. So that's what I could refer to as a solar orientation, space conditioning. So what they're now at, because their arrangement with Purpose School is on a periodic review of the terms and conditions of the contract for occupancy, they're negotiating a new deal in which the cost associated with getting more zones in these spaces so that the heating or cooling of these rooms matches what the kids need in some sense, and the lighting matches and so forth, that the cost associated that is going to be identified, shared in the terms of the new operating contract, so that the Stoneham Congregational Church is able to get all of the money associated with making those changes out of their income from their rental. And Purpose School is delighted to do it, because that means the parents who are bitching about their kids always being too cold or too hot are not going to do that anymore. And so they're getting a more responsive group. So then, all of these were transformations that happened and are figured out. When we're doing this, here are the questions you got to ask. What, whom, when, where, and how? Not a whole lot different than what we taught our children about how to get along in life, right? So you got to analyze the existing use in your building. For example, when you walk into your building, do you have a sign that says there's something of that sort? Or do you have on the outside sign that talks about these uses? And I do think the Sunday sermon here is entirely appropriate, because if you're doing work in your house of worship that has all of these things going, then indeed there probably is a joyous future. Or is that what you've got? Blank. Nothing. No signs up, no activities, no nothing. Pretty much a blank of what's going on. So one of the things that you need to do is do an analysis of each of your space, put a name there, and just fill out what hours, morning, afternoon, and evening, those spaces are used. It is pretty humbling when you realize how much space you've got in your house of worship and how little it gets used. And until you fill that out, you really don't understand. But that helps you to know what's available. Now, what can you do and what else? Gee, is there an organization where you might get some ideas? Yeah. If you go to that website, ecbf.org. Sally, does that mean it? Can you tell me what that organization is? Dee Dee, sorry. Oh, that's this one. Yeah. Oh, you mean if we go there to alternative building uses, we get all of this information?
All that information.
I'm shocked and amazed. People actually do things in Richmond, Virginia. Okay. So let's start answering questions. Who are we doing this for? And here are some pictures of the array of places and people for whom things are being done. Teenage kids. This is a jail. Building through Habitat. Food programs. This is an outdoor one. That's a senior property. These are kids in Tanzania. These are kids in New Bedford. Outside their building is all gardening now. And this is a sanctuary that's used very frequently for music programs by other people. And there are lots of those going on. Okay. When do we do this? It's at core time, not spare time. One of the things about your space use is you're going to know what's going on and what's identified as critical time. You got to do it on their time, not your time. That is there. Who is it you are serving? You figure out when they need it, not when you're available. Being a disciple of Christ is not called taking the easy route, but it is the good one. Because when is God's time all the time? None of this is yours. It never was. Where do we do it? Well, here's an analysis. One way to do it. If you're used to Google Maps, you know what this means. Okay, now I'm starting there. This is a Boston area, getting a little closer. Now I'm down into a building in Stoneham, and oh my heavens, there is the Stoneham Congregational Church. And what is it that you notice about that building in relation to anything else?
By itself.
Well, one, it's by itself. Two, you've got a big open space. Three, if you looked a little from here, you're downtown. And in a pretty highly traveled route, easy to get to. So if I'm Stoneham Congregational Church, I'm just looking now, I'm saying, you know what I could do here, because I got all this outdoor space and places to go, and I'm close to downtown, and where parents are going here, I bet you we could do a preschool program here. Particularly if I've already got this back space built, and it was just built for Sunday school, and nothing else is going on in it. So you can do this locational analysis. And then you've got to ask the question, how? Well, this is a stewardship question. And by the way, stewardship is not about fundraising. It's about faith raising. So it is, as with all stewardship, time, talent, and treasure. It is the case, ask and it shall be given, knock and it shall be opened. Those are not cliches from the Bible, folks. That's reality. So you've got to assemble mission ministers for each mission. And for those of you who are Episcopalians, in the back of the Book of Common Prayer, in that section known as the Infrequently Asked Questions, also known as the Catechism, on page 855, the ministers of the church are lay persons. So you assemble the ministers for the mission. So let's go through some examples here. Here's a messy storage, maybe kind of meeting space in the lower level. It's also got some terrible heating, old steam systems. The reason you had to have the steam radiators on the wall up like that is the boiler's down over here and the steam condensate return. Steam turns into water. It condenses. It's known as condensate. It flows back. In the days of yore, it had to always go downhill. So if you're in the basement, to go downhill, you got to put the radiators up on the wall. Well, is that stupid or what? Because heat rises. So how does the heat get down here? Okay, you got a problem with that. So here's one of the things that you can do. Here's an 18, and this is kind of squint or look at it, but it's on your thumb drives and you get all of this. But here's a uses and sources in which what's being done here for about $84,000, you're going to put in some new windows. In this case, let me go back a minute so you can see this. I got odd-shaped windows there, old building, that I'm not going to easily find a standard window someplace to replace these. So there is a type of window called biglass, which takes the existing wood frame, pops out the old stuff, puts in thermopane, gets rid of the need for counterhung so you can insulate that space. So I'm going to do 5 windows. I'm going to change and put in, instead of these damn fluorescents, for those of you who didn't know, I was authorized to speak in those kind of 4-letter words by Julie. Get rid of these and put in LEDs with dimmers. You can do it. I'm going to put in in-floor radiant because I'm going to change from my steam system to a hot water system. If I'm doing preschool, you know, where are those kids? First of all, the kids are only this big anyhow. And second of all, they're down here all the time. So I want it to be warm down here. And if you do that with in-floor radiant, which you can put in using big sheets of plywood that's already made, there's little things in it, the heat's there, you put on some cover, warm, even, and a lot lower. So I'm going to do that with piping to the boiler room. I'm going to do an energy management system. I'm upgrading the whole church anyhow, but I want to do that so that my sexton can fix all this, Jim was saying earlier, can just do all of this stuff, okay, from his office, or if he's home, Oh, gee, I can just go on my iPhone and fix it. Okay. I'm going to do the subfloor. I'm going to do a type of flooring. I identified a type. It's a Bolin is a type. Easy to clean, doesn't stain. You can drop all kinds of water and everything on it. Kids can puke on it, and you're still going to be okay. I'm going to do more prep and paint. I'm going to upgrade the restrooms with 0.8 gallon per flush toilets and all that, and make them kid height so they're able to deal with that. I'm going to deal with new entry controls, new furnishings. There's some demolition involved. I'm going to pay a mechanical engineer for some work, and I'm carrying a contingency. I'm going to raise about $11,000 out of the parish operating budget. I'm going to get some rebates from the electric company for lighting and the gas. And then I'm going to go to this organization called ECBF and get a loan. $70,000. But guess what? When I make that changeover, instead of that being dead space, I'm going to have income. It's going to pay this loan back faster than even ECBF would make you do routinely. And so you're not doing good things, you're making these changes, and you got a way to pay for it. And here's how that happens. You're going to get this kind of rent. They're going to pay their utilities. So there's your income, about $22,000. Your expenses, the utilities is a match up. You're putting money into reserves. You're not having, it's called a reserve for replacement account in your church, so that when something goes bad, you've got money to pay for it. Good planning. Some other costs associated. There's your debt service on that. At 6.5%, 15 years, debt service of $74.45. You're now netting nearly $6,800 out of what was otherwise dead space. And you're doing a good thing. What's not to like? Okay, let's talk about an existing space. This is one that actually, this is happening already, so I've already got the yoga picture. But it's going to be just for that user. And so what we're doing here, because yoga, this happens to be one in Massachusetts, and this place for this yoga, they need it to be 80 degrees when they're in there doing their work. Okay. It was killing the church budget, so let's do some changes. So I'm going to put in split system heat pumps that serve that space only. So they can set that temperature. A heat pump basically generates either heat in or cooling in. It's kind of the way your refrigerator works. There's a lot of technical stuff you don't need to know, just say heat pump. I'm going to add an electric meter that handles just that space. I'm going to change the lighting, so I've got efficient lighting in. I'm going to deal with windows that are a mess so that they're efficient and hold that heat in. I'm going to prep the room. There's a contingency, $36,000. I'm going to get some of it out of the parish. I'm going to do some workday because they're doing in-kind stuff, rebate, and a small loan that we're still going to be happy to give you. And now look, here's your $7,200 rent, a little bit into reserves, debt service. You're coming out, instead of getting killed on what it was before at the cost of like $5,000 a year, you're net ahead for just a small space for that kind of thing. That's a relatively modest change, and it works. Now, here's a real, much more dramatic option. Kind of a 1960s Swiss chalet church. And you can see in the back a connected parish house. This was actually a Baptist church, but I'll still use Episcopal language. There's the church looking to the front and the altar. The outside, there's the back, so that's looking out there. And this is looking towards the back. And what they're going to do is convert it to a two-level open office in the rear, back in here, and doing meeting and worship space, conference space in the front. So pretty much everything from this section back is going to have 2 levels, little lift, stairs, lots of office activities in there, dramatic space. It happens to be in downtown Natick. There's parking right next to it, high demand, the sort of place that the computer-based companies go with all the 20s and 30-something who work for them. And then here's a large meeting area which, like Holy Apostles in New York, when you're having a worship in there, you reconfigure it for worship. Otherwise, it's a conference room, it's meeting room. It's where you do shows, whatever sort of thing you want. This is a little over $600,000 to do this kind of work because you're creating this second stair. That's about 43% of the cost. The lift, the finishes, updating the HVAC system, because if you 20 and 30 somethings, I'm not working here if it's not cool in the summer. So you got to have AC in there, even in the north, and for sure in the south you do. Glazing, entry controls, smoke and fire and sprinkler, your architecture and engineering team, a certain amount coming out of the parish operating budget, essentially what it's going to take to cover the AE team and the upfront. And then a 540, you get a bunch of rebates for this, and then 540,000, a big loan from ECBF. I mean, not a 7-figure loan, but this is not doing the whole building. It's a part of the building, you're doing that. So a large amount of stuff. Now, what's this going to generate? You're getting $85,000 it's going to cost you, including paying off the load, $75,000. You're $10,000 ahead on what is otherwise dead space. And you're doing something useful. And if you pay, when the loan's paid off, that $57,000, of course, is going to go up. Or the rent's going to go up, you're going to come out ahead. The rent's going to go up probably. You're going to negotiate a deal that every couple, 3 years, you're going to get some rent up. So you're going to keep coming out ahead. Big change, big difference on what you're going to do. So let's go back to where we started, was God's will. This is on your thumb drive, so you want to look at it. But it's identifying what God's will is, investigating the choices, and making the decision. And I know I wasn't supposed to use this word, but doing is a continuing discernment process. Okay. $5? Hey, I made so much money doing this, not a problem. So there is that. That's from a wonderful book, if you want to read it, Discerning God's Will Together. Now it's 10. Morrison Olson, A Spiritual Practice for the Church. Yeah, discernment is not just what you go through to decide if you're going to be a priest. Discernment is everything you do to be one of God's people. So transformation is your mission. Jesus loves you. You want the thumbs up. Figure out what Jesus is going to want you to do, because that love your neighbor thing, I meant that. When you do the mission, it's there. You live by the standards of the kingdom of God, not the kingdom of Wall Street. Don't worry about the money. Wonderful story when we were doing prison ministry. Young woman, Sue, 2 kids, probably worked at McDonald's or something like that, said, if what I do is write the first check to the church, there's always enough for everything. But if what I do is write the first check to me, there's never enough for everything. It's about following the standards of the kingdom of God, because when you do that, you make good decisions. A good friend of mine sent me this. When God pushes you to the edge, trust Him fully, because only 2 things can happen. Either He will catch you when you fall, or He'll teach you how to fly. And most of the time, He teaches you how to fly. Here's how to find me. Don't hesitate. Happy to help. But mostly I'll be happy to hear when you have transformed where you are. Go forth and love the Lord.
Amen.